Just a few minutes ago, Peter, when I asked you if you'd had lunch and offered you a cup of coffee, you said something interesting. You said, "Where were you when I needed you?" Um, you were a child in Terezin.
Well, I was looking at it as a concept of a mother, of somebody who really cared. And I suppose that in my childhood I didn't find too many people in that capacity to care. And so I'm making reference to it now in a joking manner.
Yes.
So that was what I meant, and I meant it.
Yes.
But I would like to have had you, show the concern at that time.
Thank you.
Mm.
What are your earliest memories? Do you remember anything before you went to camp? Well, first, what year were you born?
I was born in 1936, in the summer, July.
Uh-huh.
And the earliest I remember was living in an apartment with my mother near the Bayerischen Platz in Berlin. And I must have been 4, possibly going on 5, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't think I can remember past that time or beyond, prior to that time. And that was primarily just an existence that we were going through. My mother had to go to work every day, or she was out looking for work. This was, you figure, it must have been in 1939 or 1940. And I was to stay in the apartment all day long. I wasn't allowed to leave. So I would be in that apartment by myself all day long from early morning, and I would have lessons to study. My mother would give me some assignments. There was food there, whatever little there was, I was to eat at a certain time. And those were my earliest memories of me, myself.
No neighbors to
No,
to
I
look
don't
in
remember
on?
any neighbors, no.
Mhm.
We had there were some relatives that I remember vaguely, and I think we visited them a few times. In fact, one time, I think she put me on a train by myself. I don't know how old I was, but it must have been before I was 6, visiting relatives outside of Berlin. And that was my only rememberings of a contact outside of my mother.
Mhm.
It was during that time that it was obviously difficult to wander around freely, and we were very restricted in our movements. And that's why my mother had to work, and she had no way of taking care of me. So she did the only thing she knew how was to lock me up in the apartment. Not lock me up, but put me in there and instructed me absolutely not to leave.
Mm.
So that was my earliest memories.
What do you remember in that time? Do you remember being afraid or bored or?
Oh, no, I don't remember. I don't think I remember feelings. I think I kept busy a lot. She tutored me in certain subjects, and I believe I may have started reading already, at that time,
Mhm.
out of desperation, I'm sure. And sitting by the window a lot and looking out over the plaza or square that was there, and people, the cars, and whatever,
Mhm.
you know. But that was about all I can remember. Mm.
And what do you remember about the relationship with your mother at that time?
It was distant. I don't remember much warmth between us. I'm sure that during that time, difficult time, she was probably trying to survive with a child. She probably didn't have much time for warmth, or at least I don't remember it. I'm not saying she didn't give it to me, but I don't really remember her with a warm feeling. It was purely a matter of survival, and that was our priority at that time.
Right. And your father, was he out of the
To the
picture?
best of my knowledge, my father left either before I was born or right after I was born and went to Shanghai with his family. At that time, there was, I understand, there was a movement of Jews to Shanghai, and he joined with his family, leaving my mother and me behind.
Then after this period alone in the apartment in Berlin, what happened next?
Well, the next thing that happened was a knock on the door, and the inevitable knock on the door with the Gestapo agents. And ironically, my mother had always warned me about don't open up the door for anybody. You know, try to keep it closed and don't open up for anybody. Obviously, fearing some officials would be coming. Well, I don't care how much you can tell a 6-year-old not to open up the door. When the knock on the door is and 3 or 4 grown men telling you to open up the door, you know, I opened up the door.
You were alone?
I was alone, right. And they were dressed in civilian clothes. I think there may have been one in a uniform, I'm not sure. And they just waited. They waited in the apartment until my mother came home. And I don't remember how long that was, maybe a few hours. I don't remember anything about them. I didn't mistreat me or anything. I just really just sat and waited for my mother. And then when my mother came home, I do remember her coming home and the look of recognition on her face, knowing who it was. And probably an hour later, we were down in the center, you know, for where they're collecting all the Jews to be sent to the camps. So that happened that quick. And did you want me to go on? Or?
Yes,
yeah.
please.
Then the time is somewhat fuzzy, but probably the next day or so, we may have been in these crowds of people for days. It may seem like that. And we were being processed. And luck would have it, I came down with yellow jaundice.
Was this still in Berlin?
This was still in Berlin.
Yes.
This was at one of the collection points.
Yes.
And obviously that was a scary sight to see some little boy turning yellow. So that's one thing, they didn't want an epidemic right there. If, I don't know, is yellow jaundice contagious?
I don't know.
No. So anyway, they took me to the hospital, and I was in the hospital for about a week possibly.
And where was your mother?
They allowed her to go back to her apartment and settle up and to take care of whatever she has to take care of. And at that time, she gave her about a week to settle whatever affairs and try to take care of a few things, contact some relatives or whatever. And it was really sort of like a blessing. And then after I was released from the hospital, then she and I were shipped off to Theresienstadt.
Do you recall anything about that?
About the
journey or
about the journey?
arriving there?
Well, the journey wasn't very pleasant. I can't describe very much about it. It was distasteful. We were in a cattle cars, and we must have been on the road for I'm surprised with this. It was, it just was an unpleasant situation. I really don't know how to put it into words. It's just lots of people crammed into lots of freight trains. And I don't remember how many days, but consider from Berlin to Czechoslovakia, in 1941 or 42, probably took 3 or 4 days, days and nights. So it was a relief to finally get to the camp, knowing what was waiting for us. And we just got there in the middle of the night, and they marched us to some barracks. And I don't think there was too much, in recollection, I think it was uneventful, from the time we got there, just normal administrative details that they may do during that time. And then I was sent to a children's compound within the total camp.
Yes.
And that's where I remained until the end of the war, until the Russians liberated us.
Do you have any memories from that compound?
Well, fragmented memories.
Yes.
Children my age, children a little bit older, some attempts at doing some tutoring, some attempts to keep us in control, some, I don't remember too many specific instances at what, a few things. It's funny, at 2.5 years, it get reduced down to 10 minutes worth of memories, and I'm trying to dig it up because it's got to be more than that. That's about what it is. It was sort of a loose structure for the children, if I remember. In other words, we weren't too regimented. There were some adults in charge of us, and we had certain, I think, jobs or duties that we had to take care of, but I really don't remember any abuse, physical abuse to the children.
Do you remember any jobs you had?
Well, I don't really remember any of the smaller routine things. I remember one of the jobs that we had went on for just a few days. The children were loading up, we had formed the human chain, and we were loading up white boxes, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, I don't know, but there were just a lot of them, truckloads of them. And they were just all beautiful white boxes, and they had the children, and they're like a human chain, passing them on, loading them on the car, and nobody knew what they were until one of them dropped, and they were full of skulls. And it was just, I don't remember what our reaction was. There were guards around, so I'm sure that we just kept right on working, and who knows if the impact was really that great as it would have been if we were adults. Again, I don't remember. I remember the incident. However, I don't remember too much afterwards or what the results of that discovery were. It's just, it was one of our jobs, you asked. I remember I had a chance to get out on my own a lot. I was always a private person, and even from that time on, having lived alone for so long by myself, except for my mother in the evening, that I had learned to live within myself at a very early age. So I managed to get away from the children's compound a lot and do a lot of wandering around myself in the compound, in the camp. What I did is, it's probably immaterial. I'm sure it wasn't that, just what I think what a normal 7, 8-year-old wants to do when he's out in the park or something. Probably just want to get away and just be by himself. And the children's home, I don't remember any negative things about the children's compound. I think like I said, we weren't mistreated physically. Food-wise, we were talking about that earlier. I am blessed with a tremendous good health. I catch one cold every 5 years, and I've had no illnesses, and I don't miss any work, and I just feel fantastic health-wise. And I think one of the reasons is I had very poor nutrition as a child. I don't remember milk, ice cream, cookies, chocolates, all the great things that we all just eat now. During the war, from the late 30s on in Germany, you were lucky if you could get a piece of bread, a potato. Meat was impossible to get. Just the true basic, items from the earth. Obviously, very little man-made. And then when we went to the camps, all I had was barley soup for 2 years. I mean, that was it. Barley soup, probably twice a day. I learned to drink black coffee and a piece of bread. And that's all we ate. I mean, I know nothing from eggs, from milk, ice cream, candy, broccoli. I mean, all the things that I'm crazy about now. And I think my system just learned to, just to get hold of these natural foods and just live off that, and did not have a chance to break down because of synthetics or some of the other items, like, well, milk obviously is good. However, I just, and I, fortunately, I sometimes get on some kids and tell them that they ought to not eat too much junk food now, because when they're 47, they're going to feel it. Anyway, that was nutritional.
Yeah.
So,
Do you remember any events in the camp?
well, during the time, I don't think I remember any significant events. During the time of reunion camps, no, I just, things are fragmented, things are ghosts, things are just, they come and they go. I remember, I have to tell you that sometimes you hear a lot of stories from a camp, and if I don't remember, maybe I'm trying to force myself to remember things that I've heard happen, and then tie those two things in. I'm trying not to do that.
Yes.
I want to make sure that I personally remember these things,
Right.
not the things that I've heard. So it's hard for me to really separate out what I may have seen or heard and what I personally experienced.
Were you able to see your mother during this time every day, or?
No, not every day. We had visitation about every other weekend or every weekend, or some periodic times of this nature. And those visits were uneventful. I don't really remember seeing her a lot during that time. I may have seen her every week, for all I know, and not remember. You get used to a person. But I don't really remember visiting with her very much. A few times I did. So I was, primarily on my own. I mean, even in the camp, I was on my own.
Do you remember a friend?
No. No, I don't remember any specific people then.
Do you remember liberation?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell about that?
Yeah. Well, I want to, before I get to the liberation, I remember an incident. I remember something that happened a few times. It wasn't, tantamount to very much. I remember, though, that the food supply was shipped to the camp in boxcars, and they shipped a lot of potatoes. They did put some potatoes in the barley soup, and they would unload the potatoes. The potatoes would come in, for instance, and the next day they would be unloaded the next day. And I remember maybe 3 or 4 times during the time that these cars were there, these freight trains, myself and somebody else, we would sneak out in the middle of the night from our barracks and work our way over to the railroad cars and get underneath them and take out the small potatoes that fell through the cracks. And that would be a great haul for us. We would do what we can, stuff our pockets and everything, and then we would just manage to find our way back to the barracks, and then we would have a feast.
Eating raw potatoes?
Well, we didn't. We would slice them and put them on the stoves, the pot-bellied ovens that we had for heating. Those would be sliced and put on top of the only potato chips, I suppose. Those were some of my highlights. Of a positive nature that I remember. But liberation...
You say things of a positive nature you tend to remember?
Well, those are the highlights of a positive. Yeah, I suppose, yeah. I don't find it very valuable to remember unpleasant things.
Yes.
So that's something I remember. Yeah. Liberation, well, that was an emotional time. We had heard, now I don't know if it was a rumor or if it was an actual proclamation or how the message was conveyed to the inmates of the camp. But we had been informed in one way or another that in about a week, the camp was going to be exterminated. And this was about the latter part of April, early part of May in 1945. And I mean, but people were just so beaten down. It was, you know, you'd think there'd be mass uprising, or maybe it was a rumor. People didn't believe it. But it was floating around. And about a week before this was to start, the Russians came. They came into Czechoslovakia, and they liberated the camp. And I remember, I remember the tanks coming down the street, and they were nice guys, I tell you. I mean, you know, I'm not a, certainly not an admirer of the Soviet Union at all. However, the Russians were, you know, they came in through the Eastern Front with the same as the Americans, with their candy bars, and well, I don't know if they had candy bars. Yeah, I think they had a few candy bars, oranges or whatever. They were able to camp. And for whatever else is said about the Soviet Union, the Russians, they kept order in the camp. They came, they took over the camp, whatever administrative functions they pulled, and nobody was about to leave because obviously they realized that if they opened up the, you know, people out of craziness would just run out in the fields or something and just kill themselves, you know, in the wilds or something. So they did keep the camp intact, kept the, you know, took names down, took inventory of the people, took a roll call of, I don't really remember how many people were left. And within, you know, due time, they started to transport the inmates out, you know, to various parts of the country, wherever, you know, we had requested to go. Some went to some DP camps, some went to Berlin, I don't know where, you know, a lot of them went. And about, I guess it was about a week after they came that we left, and we went to Berlin. When I say we now, I'm also talking about my stepfather, whom my mother had married. I don't know if she'd married him or not, but she had met him in a camp, and he joined us. So then now there were three of us. And
had you gotten a chance to know him
no,
prior to this?
no. I had met him. I'd met him, but I didn't have an opinion about him one way or the other. And but before we did leave, I did wake up one evening, probably a couple of days before I left, from wherever I was staying at the time, and still in the barracks or some room, middle of the night, and there was a lot of commotion and noise outside, and I had looked out the window, and there was a bonfire with maybe 20 or 25 survivors around it, with pitchforks and sticks and brooms, trying to force a German soldier they had found hiding into the fire. And he just was not fortunate enough to get away. And every time he tried to run out of the fire, you know, they kept beating him back. So he finally fell down in the fire and he expired. That was my my goodbye to that camp. And it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me to see that at all.
Had you experienced any, you know, rough handling at the hands of the Nazi guards?
No.
But you knew that
Well,
they were the oppressors.
We knew. Oh, well, you know, it was considered to be a model camp, and it was designed to show the world that we are being treated humanely. And I think, you know, for the first year or so of the camp, I found this afterwards. I didn't know at the time it was a model camp. I didn't know the history of it until my adult life, and that the camp was being shown to foreign visitors and the Red Cross, et cetera, et cetera. But I realized later that it was a facade, because I never saw any this model camp or things that would have been shown to dignitaries or visitors. I never They may have been around. I don't remember them. So unless unless the people who were being shown at camp were easily fooled, you know. So, but again, we realized it was a facade and it didn't last very long. You know, I knew what was going on. I mean, there was no doubt about it. I knew it wasn't a summer camp. And we were there, and we were Jews. We had to wear stars. You know, the soldiers were there with their guns, and I did see people die and people killed and work parties. And no, they weren't shielding us from anything. I've seen, in fact, the way my mother met my stepfather was he was in one of these work parties that came from Buchenwald. And, you know, they would just, the Germans would take these, you know, groups of men, if they were strong enough to work, and, you know, move them from camp to camp or from location to location for construction purposes. And in one of these instances, this group of men, there must have been, I mean, they were in a line, and gosh, there must have been 300-400 of them, and in all shapes, sizes, and emaciated condition, struggling and straggling and dying, coming into the camps from another location. They were transferred over here to do, well, some of them were supposed to have been building the crematoriums too. I don't know what they were building in my camp. That I didn't know. Anyway, he was in one of those work parties, and that's how my mother met. I mean, we saw them coming in. I mean, it was, you know, if we thought we were skinny, those poor devils were really skinny. I mean, you know, they've one meal a day, and so we saw all this. We were exposed to it fully, and we're part of it.
Do you have any memory of any caretaker in the camp? Anybody who took care of you, a counselor? No.
No, I don't. I mean, the only persons that would be in that capacity would be somebody in this Kinderheim, you know, child's home that I was in, but I don't really remember. I mean, I know there were people there, but I don't have any recollections of faces or names.
Can you make an estimate as to the number of kids who were around you in this group that you were in?
Oh.
Did it seem like a small group or a large group?
It seemed like a small group. The group that I was in, they may have had separated out. I mean, there were not thousands of us in one room or in one barracks. I remember maybe one group of children that I was part of that I may have spent a lot of time with, maybe a half a year or a year. I don't think there were more than 30 or 40. You know, but I suspect that some faces changed during that time.
Of children or caretakers?
No, maybe of both, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't, like I said, I don't remember any one child or person that I was close with. And had there been one there for the same amount of time, we might have. But then again, I was so asocial at that time. I was always alone. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to relate to other children. My mother did. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity. I did go to I did go to a kindergarten, or prior to it just really getting tough. I must have been 3, you know, probably just before the curtain came down on us. And so I was in some kind of a nursery school or something for maybe a half a year or about that time. And I already had problems there because I was a Jew. And, you know, if they find out. And my mother, being a German Jew, was in the same manner as thousands of German Jews, and that they assimilate with the economy very nicely, and they give everybody German names, and they don't express their Jewishness in Germany. They were part of society. Yet somehow or other, you know, I walk in nursery school, Peter Heinz Berlowitz was my name then. It doesn't say Jewish. I didn't wear a Jewish star. The kids knew I was Jewish. And, you know.
You were 3 then?
Yeah.
And you knew this?
3 or 4, yeah. Oh, I was already experiencing it then. And, well, it's happened on my birthday. And why do I remember what happened on my birthday? Because Well, I'll tell you, some kid was taunting me, and I'm sure it was probably Jewish. There's nothing else would have set me off like this except somebody calling me a derogatory name. And we must have been cutting out paper dolls because I had a pair of scissors in my hand and I threw them at the kid. And I didn't realize it was so good because it stuck in his leg. And of course, this was another kid my age, maybe a year or two older, and this was devastating to find a pair of scissors stuck in your neck, in your leg, your thigh. Well, they pulled it out, and it really wasn't that bad. You know, they put a Band-Aid on him, but I was, you know, I was put into the closet. How do I know it was my birthday? My mother came with a birthday cake to be shared with the nursery school. And well,
You
she
think this
shared
was
it
your
all right.
third or fourth birthday?
Somewhere it must have
Yeah.
been that, maybe. Yeah, it could have been maybe my fourth.
Fourth.
So yeah, I was already experiencing. Well, right about that time, we had to start wearing Jewish stars. So I knew that we were singled out for recognition
Yeah.
in some manner. So we had to wear, in our outer clothing, we had to wear a Jewish star.
So after the liberation, you went back to Berlin immediately afterwards?
Right. It's an interesting story. I never did quite figure out what possessed my parents to do this. My parents, they were married at the time, but somehow or other, my stepfather, his name is Max, he felt that, first of all, he spoke some languages. He spoke, I think, 6 or 7 languages. So he figured that he would go to work for the occupation forces as an interpreter, and in that matter, maybe get some favored treatment to get us to the United States quicker. His point was to get to the United States. Although a lot of people went to Israel, some went back, some went to England, various countries, he wanted to come to America. And so we went to Berlin and set up an apartment there. I don't know where he got the money, but he did, and we went into an apartment 2 houses away from the American occupation forces, who took over an apartment building to make it their headquarters. And there he tried to get a job, but he just didn't have the right connections. So it was a good experience for me, though, because we saw the American soldiers there. And like I said, the headquarters, there was a lot of activity on that street. I don't remember the name of the street. And we used to follow these soldiers, me and a couple of other kids who were sitting, laying around there. I mean, forget about school. I mean, you know, we were just there to stay alive. We would follow these soldiers around, and, you know, they'd be dropping their cigarette butts there. We would take all these cigarette butts and take them home to our parents so they can roll them up. And whatever bits of food. We weren't begging, but we were scavengers after the war. I mean, absolute scavengers. We used to, my parents liked coffee, and so we were making coffee over here, and after they would make a pot of coffee, they would throw the grounds out, and they would throw them in the trash cans. So we would go to the trash cans and very carefully scoop out some of those hot coffee grounds before they hit any of the other trash, as much as we can, and they'd take it home. You'd be surprised. They make coffee 4 or 5 times from those grounds. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we were in Berlin, I would say, about 6 months, 7 months. Time is so immaterial to me. And he realized that it just was no go. He just wasn't going to make the right connection. So he was eligible, though. We were eligible to the Jewish Federation to come to America. However, we had to go through the normal processing. So we went to the DP camp in Deggendorf. Mm-hmm. And we checked in there. And that I don't know what it was before, but I've seen it since. It was just an old, it's like a garden apartment complex, you know, with no really central core, just a bunch of apartment buildings, you know, sort of like in a project type housing situation. And there we waited. I believe it was through alphabetical order, and their last name was Kurlander. My mother had remarried, and I'd retained my own name.
Which was Berlowitz.
Berlowitz, which was Berlowitz. Mm-hmm.
When did Daniels happen?
Daniels happened lots of years later.
I see.
Do you want me to tell you now, or you want me to get to it later on?
It's up to you.
Oh, Well, Daniels was changed when I became a citizen of the United States. You get one free name change with your citizenship without having to pay for it. So I figured I'd take advantage of the bargain. And Berlowitz, I had nothing against Berlowitz per se. However, when I was in the military in Hawaii, I was a swimmer. And I did make the local papers a number of times for winning a swimming meet. And I always thought Berlowitz was very easy to spell. However, the reporters never did. And I have never found so many different ways of spelling Berlowitz except the right way. It must have been 10 or 12 times within a couple of years that I saw my name in the back pages of the swimming results. And I was just furious that they could never spell my name right. So when it came time for me to become a citizen, which was in 1961, I just decided to go ahead and change my name to my real father's name. On the birth certificate, his name is Daniels, and that's what I chose. So, much to the chagrin of my mother and stepfather, but, life is life, and we all make our own decisions, I suppose. So, back to the DP camp. This is in Deggendorf, and this was, of all places to have a DP camp for Jews, outside of Munich, I mean, the worst, region of anti-Semitism in probably Western Europe, maybe not Western Europe, but that part of the world. And that's where they had the DP camp. That's where they housed all the Jews who were going to be transported eventually. Well, there were thousands, a few thousands of us there. And I'm sure the local population of Munich and the southern area, they must have just, detested us being there. So what does my mother do? She sends me to school, to an outside school. I don't know what was in her mind. I guess she figured education was important, regardless. So she sent me to school, and I'm sure I was there 10 minutes when they knew I came from the barracks, and I was a Jew. And I tell you something, I experienced anti-Semitism like I never have in my life in that 6 or 7 months at school. I mean, I was about 9 or 10 years old, so I must have been 4th grade, 5th, whatever grade my mother thought she would put me in. And I felt like Rocky. I was in 3 fights a day. And it wasn't 1-on-1, it was 5 against 1. I mean, they hated my guts. Some little snot-nosed, skinny kid they thought was a danger to their society. And they just, and I used to come home, call it home, clothes torn, bloody nose. I mean, and my mother was blind to all this. She must have somehow thought that I was agitating them. And I kept telling her, it's not going to work. In whatever way I could tell her, it's just not going to work. Well, she kept insisting. And, finally I got better at it. And finally I started, getting on top of things when it came to these confrontations. I started getting a little bigger, and I started to learn how to fight dirty, and I picked up a few rocks and a few sticks, and then the school didn't want me in anymore. Then the school decided it just wasn't really appropriate for me to be going to that school. And I think at that time my mother probably saw the folly of this anyway and pulled me out. And that's about all I remember from that DP camp. We were there for about 2.5 years. And finally we came to the United States in August of 1947.
Mm-hmm. And you were then?
Then I was 11. I just turned 11.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you find that adjustment here? How did that go?
I didn't find it that difficult. I didn't speak any English. In fact, we were in the Jewish Federation building in New York, where the ones who sponsored us. And we were allowed to stay there for a couple of weeks until we find our way, we find a job, find an apartment, whatever do, we settle down. I don't think I was there for 3 days when somebody came up to me and says, "Do you want to go to camp?" And, well, I had to get an interpreter. Sure, I'd like to, I mean, not another camp, but a summer camp. In fact, it was Eddie Cantor's Surprise Lake Camp up in upstate New York. Eddie Cantor sponsored a lot of camps for underprivileged children in this New York. And so off I went 3 days later, or a week later after I got to this country. Strange, I went to a camp. I was with a whole bunch of new kids. And I didn't experience it. Well, it was mostly Jews, and mostly Jewish kids. It was Eddie Cantor, he sponsored it, and they do go to the poor Jewish neighborhoods. And it was just a typical camp up in the mountains, you know, with a log cabin and an outdoor toilet and a swimming pool and so forth. It was enjoyable, very enjoyable. And I sure picked up a little English right then and there. And then, see, I came here in August. A month later, I was in school. They enrolled me in one of the public schools in New York City, and there I was.
And that was really your first continuous, comfortable public schooling, or schooling?
Oh, as far as a learning experience,
Yeah.
schooling, yes, definitely, it really was. I mean, the anti-Semitism didn't go away, even on the East Side. Even though I lived truly in a Jewish neighborhood, if you walk 2 blocks away, they were Italians. And they throw a sausage at you. You know, if you walk down the street, it was Irish. So it still existed. But, you know, after coming from Europe, it was easier to handle. It really was. You're more surprised than anything else of why, you know. You never saw me before, you know. It wasn't as devastating as, you know, as we went through before. So the schooling was, it was a continuous schooling. I remember I had a tutor there, one of the young female students who spoke German. They assigned her to me to tutor me, to help me catch up. And from there, it was just...
Well, you had quite a bit of catching up to do, not having really been in school for all those years.
Yeah, education-wise, I've just had my ups and downs. I managed to get a master's degree out of Arizona. However, it took a lot of years, and it took not even having gone to high school, because I dropped out of high school when I was about 14. And then I went back to school when I was 25. Went to college when I was 26 and just continued on. So my education has been sporadic.
What is your master's degree in?
In international management and business.
And how did it come about that you dropped out at 14?
Well, this goes back to probably our roots, our background is my mother. I think the war just absolutely devastated her. I think she probably just went through so much hell that she just never really settled back down into a normal life. She may never have known a normal life, I don't know. But it was just intolerable for me to be at home. I mean, we came when I was 11 years old, and by the time I was 14, I've probably run away from home about a half a dozen times. I've probably been, you know, it's just intolerable. It's just, I was truly an abused child. I mean, physically abused. Once a day at least, maybe most of the time twice a day.
By your
by
mother?
My mother.
Not your stepfather?
No, never laid a hand on me. Just my mother. There was just a lot going on in her. Just a lot going on. The war and not having a husband or my father, whoever he was, just having gone through this, and she just didn't know how to handle it. And then when we were liberated and came to the United States, instead of embracing that, she got worse. I don't know. I think maybe it all welled up in her at that time. Maybe she finally had a chance at that time to let it all hang out, and she just took it all out on me. Absolutely. So I left home when I was 14, and I've never been back since. I see my parents now. They live, you know, local. But at that time, I didn't, I think I saw them 1 or 2 times after 14, and then it was 12 years I saw them again. We just really had a complete estrangement. I mean, we were separated. I don't even look at them as my parents now. It's just, I never knew any warmth from the time I can remember as a child until the time that I finally left home when I was 14. I don't remember any warmth. I don't remember any, mothering. So, and I survived. I mean, I was on my own for so many years, all alone, that it was nothing for me to move to Texas and get a job on a ranch and get various jobs and just keep bumming around and finally winding up here.
How did you get the idea to go to Texas? Is that where you went when you were 14?
Well, no, I think I went to Texas when I was 16. I was kicking around other parts of the country at that time. But I remember Texas because I suppose I fulfilled every boy's dream. I became a cowboy when I was about 16 and a half. And how that happened, I think I was in New York. I had come back from Ohio, someplace. I was in Ohio for a while, and I'd come back to New York, and I had about 3 words with my mother over the phone. And realizing there was nothing there, I try a little bit and it doesn't work, and then you say, well, I was right, she doesn't want me. So I just walked up to the Greyhound bus terminal, I laid $100 down or something. I says, just how far will this take me? I mean, literally. And he says, well, you can go to Dallas. And I said, fine, give me a ticket to Dallas. So I remember the Greyhound bus to Dallas. And I had a few experiences over there too, not related to the camp, but other things.
But you managed to take care of yourself
Oh,
through
yes.
it all.
Yeah, very well. Well, I had to.
When did you start to be able to make relationships with other people, with a boyfriend, a girlfriend?
Well, how deep of a relationship are you talking about?
How deep did you get?
I've never had any close relationships in my life, except my present wife. It's the only close relationship I had my whole life. I've had lots of close acquaintances, lots of friends. I'm a congenial person. I mean, I don't bite people and I don't curse in public, and I think I'm a nice guy, but I just don't make close friends. I've known people for lots of years, but we are not close. We're just sort of acquaintances, and I just don't put the effort forth to nurture relationships or to promote them. Usually it's the other person, male or female. They will be the ones to call up, and they will be the ones to set up social events for us or for me, and it's fine. I've always had people do that, so I've never really taken the time to generate or to promote or to enhance relationships to any great extent. I tell you, if I hadn't met my wife, I could have just been a hermit. I mean, really, I could have lived off by myself in the woods, really. I mean, I don't dislike people at all, but I don't really have a need for people. I mean, I just really, truly, externally, just I've never felt a need to be around people or to have people stalking. I hear I'm in management with my job, and we get lots of materials on personnel development, on how to treat your staff, and from a supervisor's point of view, and the various aspects of relationships between employer and employee and supervisor and so forth. And I can't relate to that. Everybody says the stroke is the most important thing. The studies have shown that people would rather be stroked than get a raise. I don't care if they never stroke me. I know I do a good job. I know that I am doing the best that I know how, and I do better than a lot of people. I don't have to have somebody else tell me that, and I've never been fired for incompetence, and so the relationships have never been there. I've been married a couple of times, but it was strictly, I believe, I think they put out the efforts stronger than I did. I kind of just went along with things.
So this is your second or third marriage? And how long did the first?
6 years.
And the second?
Second, about 2 years.
And children?
I have one child from my first marriage. He's going to be 13 years old in January. He lives in Oregon with his mother and stepfather, and I don't see him very often. I don't see him very often.
Is that okay for you?
No. I don't know how I feel about it. I get feeling guilty sometimes. And in all honesty, the guilt feeling is I should feel more for this, not not pining for him. I feel guilty because I should be a better father, or I'm not reaching out. Should I be doing it? Is it okay? Do I want to disrupt a life up there with with a new father who's been around for a long time, who he feels very close to? I am trying to figure out, do I have a right to go up there and start pressing into that? How would they feel about it? Is it going to be confusing to him? I feel guilty about all those things, about even thinking about them.
Mm.
Really. So.
Have you asked your son what he wants?
Well, I haven't talked to him in about a year, and I feel he's somewhat immature in that area, and I just don't think he knows. I think he is a little bit like I am. Well, he's like little kids. They just kind of shift with the wind. Unless there's something there to confront you where you have to make a decision, most kids will just, I think, the ones that I'm in contact with, they'll just go whatever's easiest to go, like I have most of my life. Even though I've gotten the things that I want, I've really reached a lot of my objectives as an adult. When it comes to relationships or personal contact with people, I kind of let things just drift the way they go. I mean, if it's good, I'll go along with it. If it's not, I'll back off. And I see him as being this way, but I think him as being of the age, maybe not of the demeanor like this. So I'm sure if I say, hey, let's come on down here and visit with me, he'd be happy to. But when he comes down, when he has visited me, I don't know him. We don't know each other. And by the time we get to know each other, he's going back up there again. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's some feelings about all that, and I'm just, hoping I can, eventually it'll work out.
Mm-hmm. As you look back on your experiences as you were growing up, you didn't really have a model for a close father-son relationship. Why do you suppose that didn't happen with your stepfather? Do you have any ideas about that?
Well, looking back now, I can probably see his point of view too. He married. I don't think he was married before, but he met a woman in a camp that he considered to be, that he wanted to have a relationship with. And there was excess baggage there, I believe, which I'm sure didn't enhance his relationship. So he was not
the child?
Me, yeah. He was not a father, just like I'm not a father. Or a father knowledgeable how to be a father. Before I had my son, I didn't know how to be a father. I'm learning to be to my stepchildren, and a little bit too before we split up with my son. He didn't know how to be a father. He was never a father. So all of a sudden you inherit a 10-year-old who's really not easy to handle, who's been on his own, who has learned how to get along in the camps and how to survive in the camps, and who has a very strong mother, really domineering mother, who is either overprotective or whatever went on in her mind. And he was probably overwhelmed by all this and probably just stayed in the background. And so when the confrontation between my mother and I, or confrontation, it was one-sided, he just blended into the background. So he was never a model for me at all. He was never a role model. I never looked up to him. He never gave me any reason to look up to him. I mean, he was an honest, decent man. He's clean, he's well-mannered, and he's well-spoken, and there's nothing negative about the person, but it was, so I didn't have a role model. No, I have never had a role model. I never stuck around long enough to really look up to any one person to model myself after. So I may be a composite of a lot of people. Tom Mix and Hopalong Cassidy and the Lone Ranger and whatever else.
The cowboy
Jack
image
London.
lives, huh?
Well, I just, we all, in the 50s, how many cowboy movies were out there, you know. So, no, not necessarily cowboy image, but I was just throwing that out as...
Do you ride?
Well, I used to, well, I don't ride now, but I used to, you know, I used to be on a working ranch. So, yeah, it's not much fun. I don't care. I don't care what you think. You may sit in an apartment in New York City and decide it may be nice to be a cowboy in Texas, but when you're really a cowboy in Texas, I'd rather be doing this. So, no, I'm probably a composite of a lot. I mean, my models, I just had to grasp qualities of different people that I've known to model myself after, and I think I've done a fairly decent job because I've never been in any trouble with the law, and I've always tried to maintain an ethical attitude towards life. And
who do you think were your strongest models?
I don't remember anybody. I don't really have anyone to... I don't really... I can't even think of anybody. Even though I'm sure there were lots of people, you know. Even if I only met somebody for one day, there may have been a particular quality about that person I wanted to imitate. I may not remember the person, but I'm sure I picked it up someplace. Because I've been with some real scuzzy characters in my life.
You have. In your years of wandering around.
You don't bumming around like I do without running into with the low life. I mean, really the low life, all the way across the country. Somehow or other, I didn't pick up too many of their traits. Maybe one or two, but generally I've managed to mold myself after of individuals or people that I admired and who I think had loftier goals in life. So,
what are your goals now?
My goals now? Well, I really to finish remodeling my house. Probably to reach a little more stature in my company, or to open up a business on my own within probably 5 years if I don't reach what I want with this particular company that I'm with. And also to settle a relationship with my son. I think probably more than anything else, I'd like something to happen. I mean, something. Positive or negative. It's just, I hate to have it hang. And I know it's me. I mean, I'm the adult in this. And I just need to get this thing going here, so once and for all, we know where we stand with each other. And just to live a good, clean life, I suppose.
Is there something you're afraid of in your relationship with your son? Is there something fearful about initiating that?
Well, not fearful. It's just that the times that he and I were together, he was 2 years old when I was divorced. So from the time he was 2 until he was about 9 or 10, we saw each other a lot. I moved up to Utah for about 7 months while his mother was going to school up there, so I could be nearby. I saw him every weekend and a couple times during the week. Did a lot of skiing too. And when she was living in California, when they were living in Sunnyvale, she was working for a high-tech firm, and I was in San Diego going to school. No, I'm sorry, not in school. When I was working here, we were still married when I was in school. I would travel up, and we'd see each other 2-3 times a year. I'd fly him down from Oregon and fly him up, and it just went on. And then she got married. And then I could see there's a little bit less. The relationship started to narrow out a little bit. And then it started getting expensive to start flying him down here. It was just, for 2 weeks and 3 weeks. A month was too long, and I was involved in a lot of other things, and external forces and internal forces, and as time has it, it just starts to move further apart. And now the times when I did see him, I didn't feel there was much closeness there. Maybe he didn't feel it. I mean, obviously I didn't live with him, and who is this guy who's putting me on the plane twice a year? Maybe that's what he thought. And then, of course, a new father, and he started calling me Dad, and I think he started feeling uncomfortable by calling me Dad. Who's his dad? And then I started having doubts about, who is his dad? And I couldn't get it out of him. He may have been angry for not having remarried his mother. We did go through that at one time too, when there wasn't a clean break. Um, we try to keep a very amiable relationship going after the divorce, just so we wanted to keep the child, keep him, uh, immune to this bickering and aggravation between divorced people. And we did a terrific job. I mean, he always knew that we just thought a lot of him and thought a lot of each other. But how he also thought that we want to get back together. And I didn't realize that until we had a little therapy session at the Big Brothers. And it came out. So right then and there, we had to make it. We both sat. His mother flew down, and we got together, and we explained to him, how things were. We had to do it. I mean, we just didn't want him to keep thinking all these years. So that may have been also a little break then. I think he separated himself a little bit from me then. So lots of little things.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how you chose your original birth father's name when you became a citizen without ever having
met him. Well, I thought it was
longing to connect there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I thought it was a neat name. I give you all the variables. I thought it was a neat name, easy to spell. Peter Daniels. If you're going to go into the movies, sounds like a good name.
Were you thinking of going into the movies?
No, I'm only kidding you. Just a sense of humor.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Okay.
And at the time, I didn't really think very much about my mother. Maybe subconsciously I was, but I wasn't overtly thinking of getting to her or what it would do to her. However, when my son was born, I knew it because I named him Eric, and my father's name was Eric. Spelled differently, however, Eric. So at that time, I realized that I would probably alienate my mother because she obviously didn't have much love for my father, Eric Daniels, for what he did or what I perceive he did. And
which was to take off for
Shanghai.
Shanghai.
Abandon us, right? So I'm sure that all the hate and all the anger that was in her was directed at him. When he wasn't around anymore, it was at me. Maybe I looked like him. Obviously I was...
Have you ever asked her?
No. No, I never asked her. Never saw a picture of him. Don't know what he looks like. She won't talk about him. I can't put her out of the Chinese water test. She doesn't want to talk about him. She doesn't want to talk about him. And it's, over the years, I've really not, I don't think very much about it. I mean, I didn't know him. I don't have this great quest about who my father was. I'm not it doesn't, overtly it doesn't bother me. I mean, I've never had a great need to find out. However, I thought Eric Daniels was a neat name, so my son came along. We had chosen for a male, if it was a male, name him Eric with a K, except my father's name was C.H. And I knew it was close enough to bother my mother. She never said a word about it, but we never talked about it. But I knew at the time that it would probably irritate her at least irritate her.
And how often do you see her now?
Sporadically. Sometimes we see each other twice in 1 month and then once every 6 months. Because of my wife, she has a better relationship. She has a terrific relationship with everybody, so she's the one that's trying to mold a better relationship than there was. When I've told her, I said, I'll be very nice, and you can drag me up to dinners, and I'll be happy to socialize and everything, but don't ask me to change my feelings. You can't ask somebody to change their feeling.
Of course.
And I don't have any feelings. She's like an aunt to me. She's not my mother. She's like an aunt. She's a nice lady. I don't even bear any animosity towards her because I realize she went through her own hell. However, you can't tell somebody to love somebody because she's your mother.
Right.
So, I look at it from that point of view.
To take you into the present now and ask you what, as you look back on your life, what sort of values have you come out with? If you have to tell your son someday what you think is important, or if you are telling other people, what sorts of things would you say?
Well, I think probably the most important thing, important value in my life, which I like to pass on, is really respect for the other person. And that takes the form of respecting somebody who's driving on the freeway with you, somebody who's going to be parking in a parking spot, who's going to leave you enough room, somebody who's not going to shove you when they walk by. Just um, this this thing of there's so many people in this world, and it's getting so crowded, and we can't exacerbate it by being rude and overbearing towards those people that we are so close to anyway in physical proximity. And the most important value that I have, and I'd like to see other people have, if I can influence them, is just respect me for being on this world. And I would like him or those people that I am in touch with to, you don't have to love that person, you don't have to hate that person, you don't have to reach out, back off, just let that person be and try not to step on that person's toes or try not to uh, uh, step over that person on your way to a goal. Everything else, I think, comes from that. Honesty, ethics, uh, personal goals, relationships, I think really stem from really respecting what the other person is like. And we have this in our marriage, and I'm very happy. That's why I'm feel so very good about Joan, is that she knows that I'm a private person, and she respects my privacy, that there are times that I just truly want to be by myself, whether it's in the back room or it's in the backyards, doing something without being on top of me. And she knows she will get that from me. And so there is a respect for the other person's privacy or person's space. And from there we do, I think our values build on that. Because I respect her as a person, I respect what she does. If she tries something new, and if she fails, well, that's all right. She can go ahead and try something else. But we don't get on this overbearing situation.
Um, in terms of your attitude about being Jewish, you suffered a tremendous amount because you were a Jewish child. Um, how do you look at being Jewish today, and how do you still go with that? Do you express it in your life? Do you avoid it? What?
I have mixed emotions about being Jewish. Not about being Jewish, about my Judaism. I mean, I know that I'm a Jew, and I'm not ashamed of it. However, I have mixed emotions about expressing it, participating in Jewish life, and being active in whatever activities. It's because I've had no upbringing in Judaism. I've had sporadic training in Torah. When I was, just before I made my break for my family in New York, I was sent to a teacher to study for the bar mitzvah. That lasted for about 6 months, a year. I'm sure it wasn't very long. It was just too oppressive, and I just wasn't in tune to that. And I don't think my mother really pushed that much. I think she felt she did it because maybe it was expected of her, and she was living in a Jewish neighborhood. But she never practiced Judaism. And my stepfather, the only time that I ever saw any Judaism in their home was during the high holy days. And that would be the time he would go to temple. And he never even asked us to go. He never asked me to go. He just went. But as far as observing, being an observant Jew for the rest of the holidays, for Shabbat or any dietary laws, I don't remember very much of that. So I grew up in a non-Jewish environment. And my first two wives were non-Jewish. And
But your present wife
my
is.
present wife is Jewish, very Jewish. She's enough makes up for me being not Jewish. And I
Really?
love it. I just think it's great. She's really instilled some sense of it in me, even though I'm still not very outgoing when it comes to it. I am much more now than I was before. She makes me aware of what's going on. And she also points out, like you have, that I really, I've supposedly have suffered for it, and why not express it in that sense? Well, I look at it differently, but she's there to remind me of it. So we do go to temple, we do belong to the temple, and I go along willingly. However, I'm not an initiator. I still am not to the initiating point of saying, well, we have to do this or we ought to do this. It's usually she's doing it, and then I'll go along and support her. So there's that, there's that mixed emotion about it, or an ambivalence of being an outward Jew.
An outward Jew.
Well, being an outward Jew of socializing exclusively with Jews, and having a Jewish name, and truly in my manner of speaking and so forth, like some friends, associates we have, and sometimes they're surprised when I say I'm Jewish. I mean, I have a non-Jewish name, and possibly my mannerisms don't advertise that I'm Jewish. And when I say that I am, people are surprised. And will make it known that I'm Jewish, whether I'm discussing politics with somebody or some kind of philosophy that's based on Judaism. I certainly will say that it happens to be a philosophy that my religion has, or make reference to it. So I certainly am not hiding it. I did hide it when I was a kid. I did hide it for a lot of years because of harassment. But I don't feel I have to hide it now, and I don't. Maybe I ought to change my name, Daniels is not a overtly Jewish name. And,
Daniel in the Lion's Den.
oh, well, you're right.
Yeah. Well, what would you change it to?
I go back to Berlowitz. Would that be more of a connotation of being a Jewish name than Daniels?
I don't know. Would
No?
it to you?
Berlowitz? Well, it would come out to being European. It would be Polish and so what. And 99% of it's Eastern Europeans that are over here are Jewish. Not 99%, but a great majority of them, you can almost presume that they're from Jewish extraction. So, no, I guess when it comes down to it, I think I'll just stay with Daniels, and I will just, if somebody needs to know that I'm Jewish, I certainly will tell them, and if they ask, I will tell them, and if I need to initiate it, I will do so. I'll just take it as I always have. I'm sure it'll always come out to be the best.
Is there anything that you would like to change in your life now?
Change in my life now. Oh, wow. Well, I like to have a better, yeah, you mean change now or change the way my life would have been?
Well, let's take it both ways.
Yeah, it's hard to say change now. I think I'm content with the way my life is going. I think anything that I really want to change, I would have the power to do it on my own without having to wish it. I think I can do it. Change going, obviously I really had no need to have gone through the experiences I've had to, even though they may have helped me in some of my adult life to cope with things. Some of the things I could have just soon avoided. I would like to have been more of a social person. Like to have grown up in a more normal environment where I could be more I could be more part of groups of groups of people. Parts of them as being one of the boys. I'm just never one of the boys. I've never been one of the boys. I've always been somewhat aloof, or outside of the crowd. And even though it hasn't bothered me that much, because I don't get lonely. I can find a million things to occupy my time, and I look forward to being on my own, being by myself, so I can take care of a lot of the things, whether it's just sitting and thinking about life or doing a lot of the projects. It does, it is a detrimental thing, though, to let's say, my present family. Um, she, Joan, she's a gregarious person, social, lots of friends, and she probably would think that I would have lots of friends also, so I can take some of that social burden off of her. Because right now she is the social director of the house. You know, anytime we go out, we have people over, whatever, it's always her doing. And I say, I'm happy. You know, you can run your social life, and I will go along with you. And it would be nice for that relationship if I had more friends that I would pursue and generate more social contacts, uh, rather than she makes all the social contacts. If I were a bachelor, it wouldn't bother me. It really wouldn't bother me. I get off on my own and just do my own thing. So.
Do you see in yourself any ways that you suffer or struggle now that you can relate back to your early upbringing and your time in terrazine?
I find this in my my work. I'm a good technician. What I do well, and I like to think of myself as being a good supervisor, and I like to know the people that work under me. I have their respect, and they have my respect. However, I'm in a large organization, and I feel that my progress will be hindered because I am not a political person. As opposed to knowing about politics, which I do know, I'm not a political person. I wear everything on my shoulder. If I don't like somebody, that person knows it very quickly, whether it's in a subtle manner or whether it's a direct statement from me. That person knows it. I don't know, I don't have the methods of going on month after month, year after year, being congenial and being so accommodating to somebody I dislike. And it happens in my company. And I know it's going to happen where I'm not going to play ball, quote unquote, which is going to help me advance to a higher level. I've done very well in a short period of time. I've reached a good position with the company. However, I'm at that point now where it's tougher to get to the next level because we're getting into senior management. Senior management is maybe 50% of mechanics, and the other is knowing the right people, is being at the right spot, is just being congenial and friendly and just socializing
More
with the
social.
right. Yes, I'm not that. I'm not that, and I don't know how to be. I'm not going to have somebody over for dinner that I don't like, even though it may be good for my career. And I'm not going to have lunch with somebody I don't like just because I ought to, because that person's going to help me. I believe in keeping everything on business, strictly business. Let's say I'm 90% business. I will socialize very slightly with some people that I find that I would like, and I admire them and I respect them and I like them as colleagues. I will occasionally I'll break bread with them in some fashion, but that's about as far as it goes. So in that sense, my early upbringing, I'm sure, will hinder me in the socialization of later years.
And do you see any positive strengths that you may have, aside from really just surviving on very little food? And when 15,000 children died in terrazine, 100 remained. You were one of those 100, so obviously you had great physical strength.
I think
others?
I just come from good genes. I don't know how strong I was as a child. I certainly didn't have very much to eat before. I like to think that my mother unknowingly or unwittingly trained me, programmed me, or even prepared me for this by already keeping me in such an isolated state, keeping a minimum amount of food, whatever she could scrape together. And by the time we went to the camps, I can't say it was nothing new. It was new, but it wasn't shock. I wasn't coming from a fat, happy, love-filled, plentiful house with full kitchens and soft beds into this harsh environment, I was already halfway there. So that helped somewhat. And coming from good genes, I think helped. I just, I'm very grateful for that. That I didn't have the normal childhood illnesses, and they've carried through my later life. Um, the other thing is, the positive side is that people know where I stand, and I appreciate that. Everybody at my job and social people we socialize with, they never have any qualms of who I am. They know who I am. They know that either I like them, or I don't like them. They know that when they ask me a question, I will answer them honestly, or I will tell them I can't tell you. There are times I cannot tell my subordinates something. I will just be out and say, I can't tell you that. Where as opposed to a colleague of mine in the same position would say, well, I don't really know and all this. They know they're going to get a straight answer from me because I don't know how to give a phony answer because it's just too easy for them to spot it.
Because you learned somehow to be direct in your childhood?
Well, yeah, in a way. When you get harassed as much as I do, you learn to fight back and you learn not to pussyfoot around with people. And sometimes I'm amazed at my own temper. And the temper is a hindrance and it is an advantage. The hindrance is a personal relationship. When the temper goes, it's just not very pleasant to be around. However, it comes out and then it's gone. Then I don't hold any grudges. I don't hold anything. It's over with. That's a hindrance in a way because, why come out with it in the first place over something that may not even deserve such an outburst? However, this morning I was at a gas station and I filled up my car with gas and I dropped my card in the little security box there. And there were 3 guys inside and they were all busy working on something. There's just a changeover. And there were 3 people waiting there. And they were waiting and they were waiting and waiting. And I said, Mister, I have to go to work. Will you please take my card and ring up my gas? Everybody's standing around. I said, it's going to be 5 minutes. So this guy next to me says, you told me that 5 minutes ago. I says, you give me that card right now. I mean, I screamed through that double thick glass so loud, and I was angry. Mm-hmm. I says, you give me that card right now. I'm going to take a sledgehammer and smash your window in because you don't have to have me wait. Because if you had wanted me to wait, you could have told me there was going to be a wait when I got the card, give you the card for the gas. And then I would have gone someplace else. Well, he couldn't get that card back to me fast enough. I mean, he just scribbled it so fast. Those other people were still waiting around, waiting for them to be through. Now, that's where that temper helped. Mm-hmm. See, that's what I mean, a little bit of consideration. They could have said, look, it's going to be a little while, about 10 minutes while we change over. I would have said thank you, and I would have left because I was in a hurry. See, that's not consideration of just not caring about somebody else and just doing your own thing and, well, to heck with the other person, let him wait. That gets me angry, and it helped. I was on my way while those other people were still waiting to get their cards back, see? Mm-hmm. So it has its pluses and minuses.
Yes, I see.
I'm learning how to control it. I do have a bad temper. It comes out at inappropriate times, but usually at people who are inconsiderate. That's about all. Mm-hmm. Just about all.
Are you able to discuss your background, your childhood with friends, with anybody?
To some extent.
Other than your present wife?
Yeah, to some extent. I may sporadically say something, or if I feel that whatever I will say will add to what we're talking about, if it will assist in some way, or if I can clarify a point, for instance, that maybe is unclear while we're discussing it, then I'll bring up an incident of my childhood that relates to it. But I generally don't sit down and pour out my heart like I've done to you. I don't know what purpose it serves. Mm-hmm. I'm not too comfortable with people sitting there and going, oh, you poor child, and I just don't, if it's for something beyond that, then, I don't mind, but I find that usually in a social setting, that's not what it's for. And sometimes people get uncomfortable hearing these things. And you know, we get a little bit too deep, because I know that Joan will talk more about my background than I will to friends. And I'm not too happy about that, and I've told her that too. But she's going to say what she's going to say. But I find that people sometimes, after a while, get uncomfortable hearing it because they didn't go through this, and should they feel guilty? Should they feel sorry, or what? So I find myself really not talking too much about it.
And yet you are here today because you...
I'm here today because you've explained to me that it's something that, if it's going to, you know, explain things, if it'll help somebody else, if it'll clarify some issues, if it's part of another project that will help us all in the long run, I'll do my part. I'll do what I can.
Well, I want to thank you.
Well, it was, about to say it was a pleasure. It was nice being here and talking to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.